I never imagined a night as ordinary as that Friday would turn into the moment that unraveled and rewrote every part of my life. I was sitting on the worn-out sofa in my tiny apartment, trying to give my daughter Lily the calm evening she deserved after a long week, when my phone started vibrating non-stop. At first, I didn't even bother checking it. Work had a habit of invading every corner of my life, and for years, I'd learned to compartmentalize just to survive. But on that night, something about the persistent buzzing felt different, almost urgent in a way I couldn't ignore. When I finally glanced at the screen and saw my boss's name flashing repeatedly, my stomach tightened. Victoria Winters was the last person I ever wanted calling me outside office hours. Her reputation for being demanding, perfectionistic, and emotionally distant wasn't just rumor. It was my daily reality. But then a message appeared, just 2 words entirely out of character for her: "Please help." I tried to brush it off, but those words sat heavy in my chest. Maybe it was the please, or maybe it was the exhaustion on her face I'd caught earlier that week, but I found myself dialing my neighbor to watch Lily. As much as every part of me wanted to stay home and pretend it wasn't my business, something deeper pushed me out that door. And as I drove toward the address she'd pinned, I had no idea I was stepping into a moment that would change not only her life, but mine and Lily's in ways I couldn't have imagined. When I walked into the upscale bar where she'd asked me to come, I barely recognized her. Victoria, who usually carried herself like she was carved from steel, sat hunched over the counter, her expression blurred by more than just alcohol. Her normally immaculate hair was loose, her blouse wrinkled, and her voice cracked as she argued with the bartender who refused to return her keys. The sight hit me harder than I expected, not with judgment but with an unexpected softness. Because underneath the harsh boss I'd known for years, there was a human being unraveling. She looked up when she heard my name, her eyes glassy with relief, and before I could say a word, she leaned into me like someone who had finally let go of holding herself together. Helping her from the bar to my car, I noticed people staring, but for once I didn't care. She mumbled questions through tears. Why was I helping her? Why didn't I hate her? Why hadn't I walked away like everyone else in her life apparently had? And all I could answer was the truth, that sometimes people need kindness the most when they deserve it the least. I didn't expect gratitude. I didn't expect anything. I simply couldn't leave someone so clearly broken to navigate that night alone. As I drove her home, hearing fragments about her mother's death anniversary and how she'd buried her grief under years of work, I realized the cold exterior she wore at the office wasn't strength, it was armor. And for the first time, I saw the cracks she'd been trying so desperately to hide. The next morning, I prepared myself for the inevitable, the version of Victoria who would pretend nothing had happened, who would return to her hard-edged voice and unreasonable demands. But when I walked into the office, the last thing I expected was to find her waiting for me with a cup of coffee and an expression I had never seen on her face. Something quiet, something almost remorseful. She asked to speak privately, and I followed her into her office bracing for whiplash. Instead, she apologized, genuine, unpolished human. She told me she remembered everything from the night before. The call with her biggest client I'd stepped in to salvage, the way I helped her home, the way I spoke to her with patience she felt she didn't deserve. She admitted she had treated me unfairly, not because of my performance or lack of dedication, but because I reminded her of everything she had lost when her mother died. Family, warmth, a sense of belonging. And then she handed me something I never saw coming. A promotion that not only changed my financial life, but gave me the flexibility I'd needed for years to be the father Lily deserved. My hands shook as I held the folder, not because of the title or the salary, but because of the look in her eyes, the look of someone choosing to change. It was the first real step toward a different version of her, one she wasn't sure she knew how to become but was determined to try. A few days later, when Lily came down with a fever and I needed to leave work early, I braced myself for the reprimand I'd grown used to. Instead, Victoria insisted I go, offering support instead of guilt. I didn't think much of it until the doorbell rang that afternoon, and she appeared in my hallway holding a container of soup and a bag of books for Lily. Seeing her in my modest apartment, looking genuinely nervous as she stepped through the door, was like watching two worlds collide. Lily peeked out from her blanket. I studied her with innocent curiosity before blurting out, "You're the dragon lady." I nearly melted into the floor, but Victoria laughed, a soft, warm sound I didn't know she was capable of. She knelt beside Lily and admitted she'd forgotten how to be happy, how to be gentle, but was trying to learn again. Watching the two of them talk, I realized something had shifted, not just in her, but in me. After Lily fell asleep, Victoria stayed for tea and we talked, really talked for the first time. She asked whether people could change or whether they just learned to hide their faults better. I told her I believed people could choose to grow, even if it scared them. And something in her eyes softened, as if she was letting herself believe she deserved a life that wasn't lonely. Weeks turned to months, and the transformation unfolding in front of me was something no one in the office could comprehend. Victoria didn't lose her sharpness. She was still brilliant, still bold. But she gained something far more valuable, compassion. She encouraged people, listened more, softened her tone, even remembered birthdays. Rumors spread about what had changed her, but no one guessed the truth, that all it took was one night of vulnerability met with kindness. She became part of me and Lily's life in small, natural ways. She joined us for weekend outings, sat beside Lily during piano practice, and slowly became someone Lily adored rather than feared. And through all of it, my heart shifted, too. Her walls weren't just crumbling, they were being replaced with something warm and real. I found myself waiting for her texts, listening for her laughter, watching the way she looked at Lily like she'd found a piece of herself she thought was gone forever. And somewhere between shared dinners, quiet conversations, and gentle moments, I realized love was growing in the spaces where pain used to live. One spring afternoon, Victoria and I sat together watching Lily run across the park, sunlight flickering through the trees. She asked me whether I ever thought about how different things would be if I hadn't answered her call that night. I told her I did sometimes, but my father used to say the most important moments in life rarely show up looking important. They arrive disguised as interruptions, detours, inconvenient choices. She smiled, this soft, grateful smile that made my chest tighten, and said she was ready to stop being afraid, ready to stop hiding behind her work and her grief, ready to admit that what began as a disaster had become something that made her feel alive again. She spoke about her mother, about the years spent closing herself off because she didn't want to feel that kind of loss again. And then she looked at me, really looked at me, and asked whether I believed there was room in our life for her, for whatever this was becoming. I didn't answer with words. I took her hand and let her see everything I felt in the way I held on. That day, a quiet understanding passed between us, one that didn't need labels or rushed declarations. Just two people choosing to walk forward together, slowly, gently, honestly. A year after that night at the bar, my life looked nothing like the exhausted, overworked existence I once knew. Victoria's old apartment, once cold and impersonal, had transformed into a home filled with warmth and laughter, with Lily's drawings taped to the fridge and photos of the three of us lining shelves once left empty. I watched them cooking one evening, Victoria trying to teach Lily her mother's lasagna recipe, and I realized how far we had come. Later, on the balcony overlooking the city, she handed me a small wrapped gift. Inside was a cherished book from my childhood, one I'd mentioned only once. On the first page, she'd written a message about how some people save others without realizing they're saving themselves, thanking me for the second chance that changed her life. Beneath the page was a velvet box holding a simple ring. With trembling hands and tear-filled eyes, she told me she wasn't trying to replace anyone. She only hoped there was room for her in the family Lily and I had built. And standing there beneath the glow of city lights, I told her the truth. There had always been room for her. We were just waiting for her heart to come home. Sometimes I still think about how everything began, not with romance or grand plans, but with a late-night call from someone who had forgotten how to be loved. I think about how easy it would have been to ignore the message, to tell myself it wasn't my responsibility, to stay home and continue the predictable path of surviving instead of living. But choosing compassion changed the course of our lives. It gave Lily someone who loved her like their own, gave me a partner who understood both my struggles and my hopes, and gave Victoria the family she had been mourning for years. And now, when I tell this story, I don't focus on the chaos of that night or the mistakes that led us th. I focus on the second chances we often don't recognize until much later. Life doesn't always shout when it's offering you a turning point. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it trembles through a phone at 2 a.m. And sometimes it stands in front of you wearing a brave smile, asking if there's space in your heart for something new. If you've listened this far, I hope this story reminds you that kindness can rebuild what life has broken, and that unexpected beginnings often lead to the most beautiful chapters. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more heartfelt tales, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that second chances are real. And sometimes they arrive when we least expect them.